Hello, my name's Hannes, this is Painting by Letters, and today we're going to talk about this gaming board. So yeah, I really wanted to be further ahead with this board than I am at the start of this video. Basically, I've changed jobs, I've had a bit of a family crisis, I've had some friends and family events, 2 holidays since I started this board, although just short ones, not like long ones. And so a lot of it just got delayed. What I was planning to do when I started this was to take 3 days off, and on each of those 3 days I would do sort of 1/3 of the process. And that really worked for day 1 and day 2, but for day 3 I had to go to a driving assessment and a few other things, so it just kind of never happened. So let's sort of recap where we are a little bit. Initially, I researched a gaming board, then I bought the components. Initially it was supposed to be a challenge to do it cheaper than the boards on eBay. I'm going to be honest with you, I failed that challenge. However, it's within next to no distance of each other, so it's about the same amount of money as the prices in those earlier videos. I built the board, which was the last part of this project. So now I've got to paint it, plus any sealing or scenics that I might want to do. This video is going to be a little bit interesting because I only have 5 days to complete the board. I have everything that I need: PVA, spray cans, paints, scenics and flocks. So let's see how it goes. When I say I've only got 5 days to complete this board, what I mean is that I had a friend coming to visit. That friend was here this last weekend, so just before I film this. This video is going out tomorrow, or that would be, so I'm filming this yesterday from your perspective, and I had a friend here Friday through Sunday, I guess. And sitting down last week, I realised that I had to get this finished so we had something to play on top of. There were other things that I did in this week to give us a gaming experience. Obviously this is quite flat. I think Allspecs Tactics had a quote in a recent video which I absolutely love: "Planet Bowling Ball," which does admittedly feel how this is at the moment, but anyway. But it was just to get here, I only had 5 days. And when I say 5 days, I really only had 5 evenings to get here. So let's sort of review the progress. So the first thing to do was to put the rubber feet on I talked about in the last episode. So what I've done is I've bought these off Amazon. They were dirt cheap. I got 2 packs of them. That was all I needed for all boards. Just used a drill to put in a pilot hole, then put the feet over the top, and then just drill the screws in with a much lighter duty battery based drill. That was really simple to do. And if you're looking to do something like a board build and you think you want to follow this kind of feet method, I would recommend it. On reflection, I think you probably could do this with just a slightly better design than I had, but it does work for its purpose. And if you follow a similar method, I would recommend it. Next, I used some No More nails. Initially, this was just to stick down the bark, but I did run out of No More nails, so I ended up switching to PVA. The bark from Geek Gaming Scenics was supposed to give the edge of the riverbanks a bit of texture. Next, I mixed up the modelling compound. So this stuff is basically just plaster and a few other things. Just mixed it up. You just literally put water in it and put it over. I will say that although it goes over very easily and is incredibly easy to mould, I do think it's a bit expensive for what you get. You probably could produce a homemade solution for a lot less money, but it really brings this board alive. You'll see that later on. It looks a lot better with this included than it did without. So firstly, I just brushed over the boards to knock any loose bits of plaster off, and then I'm painting. What I'm painting here is a mixture of PVA and a red paint. As I want these boards to be brown, I thought basing them in red would just make that brown a little bit richer over the top, given that I was going to spray it. This paint never properly dried, but it did give the board the proper beginning for the sealing process. So once we'd sealed everything initially, I just did a bit of a test one where I painted the same thing just over a loose bit of foam just to see if the sealant had worked properly, and it did have a couple of abscesses once it had been sprayed. As such, I decided to go over with another recipe that I just found online. So one of the ones that I'd found when I was researching, it's a drop of fairy liquid, some water and some PVA. You make a really thin mix of it, you just cake the boards in it, and then you just let them dry. This drying phase, by the way, did literally take a whole day. It was still wet in the morning of the next day. So once complete, we've got to spray. So I got this brown spray. It's just a spray can from a local hardware store, and I just use this as the next layer up. The red does a lot to give it a little bit of vibrancy. I found when I just sprayed it over something else, it was a little bit duller. Once I'd done that, I then went over with a tan spray just to try and give it a bit of variation. Bearing in mind all of this is going to get covered with flocks, so the idea is just to give it a little bit of interest, and I also went under the riverbed as well. And then we've got the actual process of using some of the Geek Gaming stuff. Initially I tried to use the Geek Gaming stuff to seal up the river. Then this kind of coal mix they've got just as the riverbed, and then some stones and a little bit of flocks just to kind of give a bit of variation, and then spraying that all down with the Geek Gaming sealant stuff. This board worked really, really well. Other boards which I did slightly differently worked less well, which is kind of interesting. So I would recommend the glues and things that Geek Gaming Scenics are selling. I used just a bit of a wash over the cliff edges there, and then I wanted to put the flocks down, but I realized it was quite a lot of space to cover for that Geek Gaming stuff. So I just mixed some water and PVA together, and then just went absolutely ham with different flocks. One of the things to note, of course, is that nature does not work in patterns, so it's really important that it looks slightly unusual. I will say that the PVA underneath does give the grassy areas a bit of a lightness that they don't end up having in the end effect. I just sort of tried to trust the process. And this board didn't work quite as well. So you can see here that I just put general PVA down before putting the Geek Gaming Scenic stuff down, and it didn't work as well as the Geek Gaming mix. It's a bit of a shame given that Geek Gaming mix is just a PVA mix of some form. So clearly they've got some magic formula going on that I probably need to learn a little bit more about PVA before I can master. But nonetheless, it gives a really good effect here as well. And it is still Geek Gaming Scenics scatters and flocks and things like that. You might see me over a couple of scenes using like a tub of flock. That's some Woodland Scenic stuff, and all the bags are Geek Gaming Scenics. Just talking a little bit about that difference if you're thinking about following suit at home. The Woodland Scenic stuff gives really great coverage over a large distance, but it looks nowhere near as good as the Geek Gaming Scenic stuff. So if you're looking to follow this at home or something like that, I really would recommend considering the Geek Gaming stuff as a priority, and then maybe using the Woodland Scenic stuff just as a scatter over the top. What I try to do over the larger panels is use the Woodland Scenics really to kind of block in the primary color of green, and then go over with the Geek Gaming stuff after the fact. This didn't always quite work. And another thing that I will say is that the PVA glue that I was using and the Geek Gaming Scenics glues, when mixed together, seem to interact in a slightly odd way and create a little bit of, it's like a kind of a glossy, watery finish that really isn't what I want. It probably won't show up well on camera in the kind of conclusion-y sections, but it just doesn't quite look right. So if you are going to be using the Geek Gaming stuff and you don't have to build a gaming board in a week, my recommendation is probably to give yourself a little bit more time, let everything dry properly, then go in with the second glue. Just to finish the board off, you can see me here doing a little bit of painting. It's nothing that complicated, it's just going into those recesses that I'd already painted with a black wash, over initially with a grey and then a lighter grey, and then finally finishing with a bit of a white. I tried to do it all as overbrushing rather than traditional dry brushing. I do think that it produces a lot of visual interest in the final product. However, there were quite a number of moments where I thought I'd overdone it. It looks really good, I think, at the end, although thinking back to it, if I'd spent a little bit more time probably carving into that Geek Gaming Scenics modeling compound, I probably could have had an even nicer effect at the end. So to bring this kind of together a bit weirdly, sitting here now, I'm quite proud of it. But when I finished it Friday last week, I wasn't so much. There are a couple of places where the flock is quite thin, which isn't ideal. And I think I probably could have sealed it slightly better. The stones along the river, on one panel they're really properly stuck down, and on the other panel they're a little bit weak. So I think there probably is an exercise here to run around and do some re-gluing or something like that to seal them in a bit more. Other than that though, I think this is just an excellent start. You know, what I can do with this now is I can build scenery packs and I can do other things. I really want to get into the game Warcry, for example, and 2 panels of this board would be an excellent board to play Warcry on top of. For Warhammer games, you know, if I'm only playing a combat patrol and I really want to get into the combat patrol mode in this edition, I don't need to get out all 6 panels. This works for me quite nicely. For videos, for example, I'll be able to get out 1 panel and shoot against 1 panel to put things in perspective. It's also been really fun to set the armies out. Some of these armies are old and I've had them for years in the case of particularly my Eldar, which I was really proud of as a teenager. Admittedly, as an adult, there's a lot of things that I would change. But they look much better on a board. Like, I mean, these are the Necrons that I'm working through right now on the channel, and they look really so much better on a table. Myself and my friend, when we were playing over the weekend, although admittedly we were very hungover and I didn't give him the best intro that I probably should have done. It was also my first proper game of 10th, so I'll give myself a bit of a break there. It just felt better having a board to be on top of. And yes, we had scenery, but I've not done those videos yet. They'll be in subsequent weeks. So this is the base upon which everything else can sit and that I can build on top of. A couple of things that I want to mention just to close. Firstly, I would do this completely differently now. Although I think the foam is excellent for thickness, I don't think I needed it anywhere near as thick. I think maybe even just one layer of like foam core would have worked, just to give something to sit on top of. I think the Geek Gaming Scenics plastery stuff, although I think the effect is really, really cool, for something of this scale, it just doesn't feel economical. I'm sure that there's probably a home solution to that somehow, but the other things that we got from them are much better than any of the Woodland Scenic stuff that I was also using. The Geek Gaming Flock seemed to have responded much better somehow than the Woodland Scenics ones have to gluing and things like that. I also think, although I tried to, I should have put a bit more variation into the spray canning on top. I think lighter, earthier tones would have worked slightly better. And a final thing of note, I get what I was trying to solve with these, right? It does stop the panels sitting on top of each other, and it does protect the design on the board. But in all honesty, I've had to build quite a number of little foam things to go on top of them. For demonstration's sake, I've just got this. It's like a little foam core thing that I've built. And it's just to show you sort of how big the coverage has to get. So even though it works exactly as planned, I mean, yes, that's unpainted, it's unprimed, it's just here to demo in this video, it does detract a little bit. So something that I want to do in future videos is probably think about how to do this without it being crap. I think if I was to do this again, or if you want to do this at home, here's my recommendations. I think the 2 foot by 2 foot thing is actually a really good idea. It makes storage really simple compared to the bigger tables. I would get thin woods. I would probably use some kind of strip wood to stop it warping, which that was one of the problems that I had with this board, because the wood on the base is so thick. It was very hard, as a beginner at least, to warp it back into a shape. So I'd get thinner pieces of wood. I'd probably use the strip wood method we mentioned in the first video to actually seal things in, and I would use much thinner quantities of foam. Then I would probably do more landscaping. I think, you know, when I've shown this board to friends, to my wife for example, immediately everyone loves the river. The river looks really nice. The grasslands less so. And I think if the grasslands weren't so flat, that would work. And the reason I wanted the grasslands to be flat is because I want to put other scenery on top. But by the same measure, if the board just did that for you, it would probably be much easier. I don't know. There's things to be learned here, but also I'm sitting here and I'm really quite happy. You know, this weekend I got to have Games of 40k that I hosted. I didn't have to go to a local game store or something like that. It could happen in my own house. We could drink, we could laugh, we could eat snacks, and we could have a go. So yeah, I really would recommend this. I just would do it better than me. Maybe I've made these mistakes so you don't have to. Maybe that's my excuse. I don't know. But I'm really happy with that. I don't want the takeaway not to be. It's a really, really great start. And I've got some pretty strong ideas of what I want to do next in this space. Although admittedly, it's probably going to be a few months before I do that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure as always. Keep yourselves safe. I've been Hannes, this has been Painting by Letters. And yeah, build yourself a gaming board, it's fun.